back to Triple B, where we are Black, beautiful, and brave. I'm Candy.
And I am Ayana, and we are glad you decided to join us as we talk about the topics that are most interesting to us as Black women who are single and Christian.
All right. Well, if you are watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast. There you go. We have our ticker going. Listening to us on Spotify, definitely like us, rate us 5 stars, whatever the stars are. Give us the highest rating. There you go. And don't forget to share this episode to your friends and family that you might find this topic insightful, interesting, all of the great stuff. So definitely like, subscribe, and share, and leave a comment. Yeah, let's talk about leaving a comment also on our page. So today, our episode, or in this episode, we will be talking about something quite interesting. Maybe many of you have seen this poem or spoken word floating around on social media. So I wanted to share this with Ayana. Share with
Oh,
Ayana and let's talk about this. This
yeah.
season or in this chapter, we're talking about being content, right?
Yes.
And it's easy to just say that, right? Oh, we're going to be content, but being content and in our journey of being content does not mean that there aren't any struggles, there
Mhm.
aren't any challenges that we have to face. Um, but anyways, with that being said, I'm going to play this poem by Rebecca Dupas called "How to Slay a Dragon." All right, let's listen up to hear what she has to say. Uh let's press play.
She said, "Oh, how long you been doing poetry?" I said, "Many years, more than 20. But when I caught her expression, my smile started to fade. She said, "More than 2 decades and you still performing around the way? I at least thought you'd been on Broadway or a national stage." My nostrils fled. I shifted in my seat. I adjusted my glasses. I said, "What you say to me?" She said, "I'm just saying, more than 20 years should probably bring you fame." I said, "Well, the fact that I'm still in demand leaves me amazed. I'm grateful." I looked at sis again. There was no scales, no sharp talons, but it was a little smoke on her tongue. She was hateful. She said, "How old are you?" I took a long look around the room. I was hinting at sis to go on and move. I was trying not to be rude. I said, "I'm in my early 40s. She said, "True. I don't see no ring." I said, "No, baby girl, not yet." She said, "Oh, so you ain't meet nobody who wanted to take you off the market?" I said, "Well, of the few men that I dated, there was one I thought I would be with for life, but it didn't work out that way." She said, "Another independent woman who can't find her Mr. Right." I said, "Sis, you want to fight?" But she laughed at my offense. Instead of falling back, she leaned in. She said, "You sitting here like you ain't got no friends. At least tell me you got some kids." I said, "I don't have no time for this. My life is beautiful the way that it is." She said, "Oh, you one of them." I said, "One of who, friend?" She said, "You the type to meet a grim reality with toxic positivity. You sitting there like you never wanted to be mommy or wifey." I said, "You're talking to a woman who has a radical acceptance for whatever God has for me." I said, "Honestly, I'm at peace." And I remembered I didn't even have to be in this woman's vicinity. I started to gather my things up quickly. I said, "For the record, I didn't enjoy your company. But since you forced yourself upon me, the least you can do is tell me your name." Sis gonna say same. I said, "Same as what, girl? Stop playing." She said, "Same as the woman that I'm talking to, boo." She said, "Sis, I'm you. I'm the dark corners of your brain. I give voice to what your subconscious be saying." She said, "You met a lot of hurt people who wanted you to feel the same. You used to ignore it, but now in the quiet corners of your day, you start to regurgitate all of the negative things they used to throw your way." And she said, "Look around, sis, I'm not even here. But I'm glad that you can hear your inner thoughts really are that rude. You need to get to therapy and get them people's opinions up off of you. Because I know your life is beautiful, but the question is, do you?" She said, "Right now, you sounding like your own biggest hater. And I wanted you to know that until you let their opinions go, you are the only dragon that needs slaying." Thank y'all. He said,
Man,
"Oh, how
Oh,
long you been doing poetry?" I
wow.
said, "Many years now."
man.
Wow. 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 And
Yeah.
I've heard it before, and every time I hear it, it's like so deep. So deep. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing, Candy.
Not a problem. I think that this is a reality of many women. And I can say I feel like I was up there on that stage speaking
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
her, or she was speaking for me, right?
Mhm.
We're
Mhm.
about we might be around the same age. We're in our 40s and
Mhm.
so forth. And I have come to one of the lines that she said. She has, what was it that she said? Um, I guess her acceptance, great
Mhm.
acceptance of what God's has
Radical
for her.
acceptance.
Radical acceptance.
Radical
Yes.
acceptance. Because I wrote it down and I was like, whoa, that's deep.
Radical acceptance for what
Yeah.
God has for me and what God has for, and knowing and trusting that where I am right now is where God wants me to be at this time. And so
Yeah.
I have accepted it.
Yeah.
Radical acceptance. I mean, that
Radical
is
acceptance.
being content on a whole nother level.
For real. And I think like listening as she was going through the poem, I kept in my mind saying, who is this woman she's talking to? I was getting mad at the woman, right? Like what the person that was talking to her and telling her all these things. And then to have her come in and kind of weave in there that's really herself, it's her subconscious talking to her. Just reminds me so much of us as women, how we, our own self-talk, our own self-hate, the things we say about ourselves. And we are our
Mm.
worst enemies.
Mm. Very true. And what she said about those thoughts are more
Mhm.
so opinions that other people put on us,
Mm.
that
That we
we,
regurgitate.
yeah, and we may reject it at the time and
Mhm.
say, no, this is where I am. I have
Mhm.
radical acceptance, but it's
Yeah.
not to say that even those comments that are being made by friends, family, church family, that we still don't hear them and that we may not echo them or repeat them in the silence of our, time that we are by ourselves and there's nothing, we don't hear anything. Those creeping comments still come out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You
Because
know?
it's how we have been defined, like how society has defined us, how we've defined ourselves. So, like even the first part when she talks about, the other person who she's talking to, seemingly other person says you've been performing for 2 years, 20 years plus, and you're still only at this stage, like you should be doing better. Like you should have been further
Mm,
along. And again, as you said, it is a negative self-talk from others that we internalize and then repeat to ourselves, right? So who
mhm,
says at year 20, year 30, year 40, you should have a big house and a white picket fence? Who says that, right? That is
mm,
an ideal or a picture that was created, especially I guess within cultures like these, that there is this expectation that you are at a certain level economically, financially, in terms of other statuses or status symbols, that you should have all
mhm.
those things in order to be considered successful.
Very true. Very, very true. Like you say, and sometimes it could be our own perception of where we may believe where we should be. We
Mhm.
may have said that, "Oh, I'm going to school to learn this, and this is what I wanna do."
Mm,
And
mm.
5 years and 10 years, well, 15 years, 20 years has passed, and you're not even there. And your friends and family remember, "I remember you said you wanted
Yeah,
to," right?
yeah, yeah.
And it's like, the saying is, "If you wanna make God laugh, tell him your plans."
It's true too.
But the thing is, when you tell man your plans, they
Yeah.
somehow have a funny way of bringing it back to you, like, "Didn't you said you wanted to?" Like, "Listen, go away from me with all this, this is God's plans. He's doing something totally different that I did not even know,
Right,
10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20
right.
years ago, this is where I would be." But somehow those creeping thoughts come back to
Yes,
remind you and to
yes.
discourage you to
It
say,
does. It
"You're not
does.
where you said you wanted to be."
Right, and especially if you say, as you say, it's God's plan. Some people say, "Oh, you're blaming God now for your lack of success,
Mercy.
for your lack of attaining that goal," right? you're saying, oh, God didn't allow it. So, based on that, God must not want you to be there. Um, so again, some people might say that you're blaming God for you're not achieving the goals that you set out to achieve.
Okay, with that being said, I mean, how do you blame God? However, oh, goodness. The thing is that sometimes we make plans and we are in
Yes.
our young phase. If you would say we
Yes.
are immature in our
Mm-hmm.
faith, we are
Mm-hmm.
immature or not having full understanding of what purpose looks like.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you're young, you can speak with so much confidence that this is where God has called me to. This is where I believe.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I need to go or want to go in this
Mm-hmm.
direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
With
Mm-hmm.
my life. And then to hear later on, if you do not accomplish these particular goals, does that mean that God wasn't with you?
Right.
Or are you, like you said, blaming God that you haven't,
Mm-hmm.
as if there was something wrong with you, right? There
Right.
are cases where you can say, was not diligent enough. I did not
Mm-hmm.
study. I was not serious.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. Doors
Right.
don't open up for you in one
Right.
way or another, or you may make a different decision, may
Right.
make an alternate, get off course, go a
Right.
different route. And as young people, we may not as young people, but when we were younger, we may have made some of these choices. Um, but that's very, I don't know. I just feel like that is a toxic way to talk about, oh, so now you're blaming God versus redirecting and saying that, sometimes we make statements on where we believe God is calling us and we're not
Mm,
sure.
mm, mm. I think about multiple things. I think about women and the fact that you can go to the same school as your husband, get the same education, but then at some point when you get married, someone has to choose. Is it that both of you are going to work? In cultures like the US, it makes sense for both parties to work. And it also makes sense for one party to stay at home. And who's going to stay at home, right? So then if let's say the woman stays at home, she now becomes a housewife, the same exact education that the man had, but yet 10, 20 years down the line, her life looks totally different, right? Um, I mean, for me, in that sense, she might look back and say, okay, my success is raising my children. But in terms of what she envisioned for herself as a young person, as you said, having all these goals and aspirations, that did not materialize. You know,
Mhm.
um, so I know it sounds like, and for us as professional, single women, it's almost like we too, you also make a choice, right? Because on the other hand, you could have decided, well, I want to focus on getting married. Come hell or high water, I'm going to be married by age 30, and because I want to be married, because that's a sign of success. Versus you following or pursuing a profession where you're saying, I would like to be married, but I'm not going to get married at any cost.
Mm.
Two different positions completely.
Mhm. Yeah, they are 2 different positions, and guess what? Neither one of them are wrong, and if you decide to change, it's still not wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you start off one way or the other, and this is what I want to do, I think it's really up to you and your spouse, you and your community, you and God at that time. What what's best? What's gonna work best for you? Right?
Mhm.
And I think that
Mhm.
we tend to, or society tend to paint everybody on the same brush with the same
Mhm.
brush,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it might be where the man stays home.
Right.
And
Right.
in those cases, sometimes people in their community look at them like, the man is staying home.
He's not really the man.
And the wife is going to work.
Yeah.
That don't look right.
Yeah.
But who's to say? So what, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what? And I think that for me, once I realized that the plans that I make, God tends to change them around and laugh at them.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
I I tend not to make, like, these are what I want. These are my solid plans. This is
Mhm.
what I want. I wanna do X, Y, and Z, versus saying, if God wills,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
According to
Mhm.
God will, or whatever God has will for me to do X, Y, and Z,
Right.
that's what I want to do. I want to follow God's will. And this is just me. People are like saying, adamant, well, you have to say what you want. I can say whatever I want, but
Mhm.
at the end of the goal, for me, my one is to make it to heaven. And that's what I'm
Amen.
here for, versus I wanna be married. I wanna have kids. You have to ask God. You gotta pray and ask,
Yeah, to pray.
I and to me, it's like, no, that's not what I'm
Yeah.
gonna pray for. I'm
So the
not
bit
gonna pray for that.
so the bit I'm gonna add to that as you talk about your will, God's will versus your will. So I'm gonna ask you a question. Does God mean for us to be poor?
No, I don't believe that God wills us to be poor.
And I feel like, and why I'm asking that question is I feel like especially within our faith, it's like almost like they expect you, at least in some communities, to take a vow of poverty, right? So somehow God does not will us to be rich. And in a sense, when we talk about this success piece and accomplishing the task or pursuing our goals, for some of us, we do use God as a cop out for not becoming wealthy because you think that being wealthy is a sin, you know?
I think those are 2 different things. Being poor, being wealthy, being content, being able to
Mm,
be a contributing person in
mm,
society. When you think
mhm,
of poor, you're thinking living beyond poverty line, right?
mhm,
Whatever the poverty line is for your area, and that you are
mhm,
begging and scraping and looking for.
mhm,
I'm
mhm.
not filthy rich, but I'm
Mm.
definitely not poor,
Right.
right?
Right. But should
And
you be striving to make more money? Should you be like, okay, I have all these talents and these gifts, so maybe I should be making, based on some of the aspirations that I had, like when I was younger, maybe I should be making more money because, and then if I'm not, it's because I can say, well, God doesn't want me to be that rich.
but why do you wanna make money? I think it's for what is our intent? What is the
Mhm.
purpose? Why are you
Mhm.
driven to make money? To be
Mhm.
wealthy? There are some people who are like, "I'm wealthy and I'm gonna wear it. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm
Mm.
gonna live a particular
Right.
lifestyle." Where there
Right.
are some people who are wealthy because God has blessed them, and with their wealth, they're able to bless others, right? You
Right.
can't tell. There's some people, regardless if they're in the church or not, if they're wealthy, you can't tell by the way they
Right.
dress. You
Right.
can't tell by their Instagram or Facebook that these people are wealthy, right? It's
Right.
how you flaunt it. And I think it's a different statement as far as, taking a vow of not poverty, but of modesty, right?
Mm.
And what
Mm.
we do. And I'm not out here just trying to make so much money. It's just that God has blessed me. He's given
Mm.
me these talents, given me this gift in order to make this money. And He has asked me to steward over it. And I'm using it for this, to build the kingdom of heaven, to help those who are in need, to be able to be the hands and feet of Jesus, right?
Right.
To alleviate. So I think that's a different conversation, as far as success.
Yeah.
Because success might look different. I might be successful right here where I am because I'm stewarding it, but I'm not
Mhm.
a beggar.
Right. And it's so interesting because this is a conversation of growing up within, I feel like within our faith, that you weren't encouraged to acquire wealth. And I want to say just stretch it a little bit further, even within our ethnic groups. Like let's say a black church versus a white church kind of thing. You weren't encouraged to be wealthy within the church. Although the church needs money though, because the church is always asking for money, but still it doesn't always encourage its congregants to aim for that. And that's why when we hear things like the prosperity gospel and stuff, and we're like, oh, that's not really right. They always talking about money, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, money, as you said, the motives behind your making the money and how you're spending the money is what's important. But growing up in the church, that was never a line of thinking that, the church members should be making, enough money and investing money and making more money so the church could prosper. That wasn't the thinking, at least when I was growing up. And I say this in the context of, because even lower down in the poem, she talks about, when the voice telling her, you're one of the independent woman types, you want to make all this money, you don't need anybody else's money, kind of thing. But money is also important, right? Jesus said, render unto Caesar the money that's his, pay your taxes, and to pay taxes implies that we're making some kind of money to pay taxes, right? So that's the context that I'm really looking at as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is good. This is good. And we could keep on going on, but we're going to take a pause. We're going to
Yes.
pause right here. This is going to be
Yeah.
part 1 of how to slay a dragon. Right?
Yes. And the dragon being yourself.
Ooh, the dragon being yourself, that inner
Being yourself.
consciousness.
Yeah.
We're going to break this poem down in our next episode. So thanks for listening. See you soon. We're
Triple B out.